Around the dawn of the Neolithic period, Britain underwent a transformation that would shape its landscapes and societies for thousands of years. For the first time, people began to cultivate crops and domesticate animals, taking control of their food supply in ways that hunter-gathering never allowed. This shift to farming reshaped the land, defined daily life, and laid the foundations for permanent settlements and more complex communities. The Neolithic farming revolution was gradual and demanding, yet its impact was lasting and profound. If you enjoy exploring history and uncovering how our ancestors lived, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the past. For thousands of years before farming, Mesolithic communities survived by hunting wild animals, fishing rivers and coastlines, and gathering a wide variety of plants, nuts, and berries. Their way of life depended on constant movement, following seasonal food sources as they appeared across the landscape. Camps were temporary, and survival relied on an intimate knowledge of the natural environment and its changing rhythms. Farming introduced a radically different approach to survival, based not on movement, but on control of resources. Crops such as wheat and barley were deliberately planted, tended, and harvested, while animals including cattle, sheep, and pigs were domesticated and kept close to settlements. Archaeological evidence suggests these practices arrived from continental Europe, either through the migration of farming groups or through cultural exchange with local hunter-gatherers. New tools, ideas, and ways of life accompanied this change. The transition was gradual rather than sudden. For a time, hunting and farming existed side by side. Some communities adopted crop cultivation first, while others focused on livestock or continued to rely heavily on wild resources. Over generations, farming became increasingly important. This shift required new knowledge, including understanding soil, seasons, and animal behavior. Food production was now planned months in advance, tying people to the land and encouraging permanent settlement. Farming changed how people understood time, work, and survival itself. Farming could not begin without reshaping the landscape. Much of Neolithic Britain was covered in dense woodland, unsuitable for crops or grazing. Clearing this land was one of the greatest challenges early farmers faced. Polished stone axes were used to fell trees, while fire helped remove roots and undergrowth. This process was slow, labor-intensive, and often required cooperation between families. Clearing land was not a one-time task. Fields had to be maintained, or forests would quickly return. The creation of open farmland transformed Britain's environment. Woodlands retreated, wildlife habitats changed, and new ecosystems emerged. These clearings also made the land more visible and defined, reinforcing the idea that certain areas belong to particular communities. Land clearance represents one of the earliest large-scale human impacts on the British landscape. For the first time, people were not adapting to nature, they were actively controlling it. Neolithic farmers grew crops that had already been domesticated in the Near East and across continental Europe. Wheat and barley were the most common, chosen because they were well suited to Britain's climate and could be stored for long periods without spoiling. These cereals formed the backbone of Neolithic agriculture and diet. Fields were prepared entirely by hand. Soil was cleared and loosened using simple wooden tools. Seeds were planted manually, and crops were harvested with flint sickles set into wooden handles. Once collected, grain was processed using heavy stone quern stones, a slow and physically demanding task often carried out daily within households. Farming required constant attention, particularly during the crucial planting and harvest seasons. Crop yields were highly unpredictable. Poor weather, pests, plant disease, or exhausted soil could all lead to failure. Without fertilizers or advanced tools, farmers relied on shifting cultivation, allowing fields to rest, or clearing new land when soil became unproductive. This uncertainty forced communities to plan carefully and store surplus grain whenever possible. Despite these risks, Crops provided a reliable foundation for survival. Stored grain reduced dependence on seasonal hunting and gathering and helped communities endure long winters. Agriculture brought both stability and vulnerability, reshaping Neolithic life in lasting ways. Alongside crops, livestock became central to Neolithic farming. Cattle, sheep, pigs, and goats were raised for meat, milk, hides, and bone tools, providing a wide range of essential resources. Animals also represented mobile wealth and long-term security, as herds could grow, be traded, or used to support social relationships between communities. Managing livestock required careful planning and skill. Animals needed access to grazing land, clean water, and shelter, as well as protection from predators. Through the winter months, fodder had to be gathered and stored to keep herds alive. In some regions, particularly upland areas, livestock may have been moved seasonally between grazing grounds, linking farming to wider patterns of movement across the landscape. Cattle appear to have held particular importance. Their size, value, and prominence in archaeological remains suggest roles beyond everyday food production, possibly linked to feasting, exchange, or ritual activity. Sheep provided meat and wool, while pigs were efficient sources of meat that could be raised close to settlements with minimal grazing. Domesticated animals also transformed daily life. Close contact increased the spread of disease, but allowed far greater control over food supplies. Livestock farming deepened the relationship between people and land, reinforcing permanent settlement and long-term planning. Farming shaped every aspect of daily life in Neolithic Britain. Tasks were repetitive, physically demanding, and closely tied to the seasons. Planting, harvesting, grinding grain, milking animals, tending fires, and repairing tools filled each day from dawn until dusk. The success of the farm depended on careful timing and constant effort. Work was shared across families and wider communities. Men, women, and children all played roles suited to their age and ability. Children learned essential skills by observing and helping adults, while farming knowledge was passed down orally through generations. Survival depended on cooperation, routine, and a shared understanding of seasonal cycles. Tools were simple but effective. Flint blades were used for cutting and harvesting, antler picks for digging, wooden implements for planting, and heavy stone querns for grinding grain into flour. Clothing made from animal hides and woven plant fibers protected farmers during long hours of outdoor labor in all weather conditions. This labor-intensive lifestyle left lasting physical marks. Skeletal remains show joint wear, muscle strain, and injuries caused by years of repetitive work. Farming demanded endurance and resilience, but it also brought structure and predictability to daily life in ways that hunting and gathering never had. Farming was never guaranteed. Crop failure could bring serious consequences, including hunger, malnutrition, or even death. Weather fluctuations, plant disease, pest infestations, and soil exhaustion were constant threats that could wipe out entire harvests. Even the most careful planning could not fully protect communities from these risks. To manage uncertainty, Neolithic communities developed strategies to reduce vulnerability. Grain was carefully stored in granaries or pits, providing a buffer against lean seasons. Food sources were diversified. Livestock provided meat, milk, and hides, while hunting, fishing, and gathering remained vital as supplementary resources. These practices acted as essential backups during years when crops underperformed. Periods of stress may have intensified competition between communities, particularly over fertile land, water access, or grazing areas. Farming brought the potential for abundance, but also the stark reality of scarcity when systems failed. Social cooperation and careful management were critical for survival, as a single family could not easily produce enough food alone. Farming was therefore more than a technological shift. It was a profound social challenge. It tested cooperation, planning, and resilience. Communities had to work together, share knowledge, and adapt to changing conditions, forging social bonds that were as essential for survival as the crops themselves. Over generations, farming reshaped Neolithic Britain. Populations grew, settlements expanded, and landscapes became increasingly managed. Fields, paths, and grazing areas permanently altered the environment. Surplus food allowed time for craft, trade, and monument building. Farming supported the construction of long barrows, causewayed enclosures, and stone circles. Most importantly, farming changed how people understood land. It became something inherited, defended, and remembered. Identity became tied to place, ancestors, and territory. The agricultural choices made during the Neolithic laid the foundations for all later British societies. The introduction of farming transformed Britain forever. It bound people to the land, reshaped the environment, and created the conditions for complex society. The fields of Neolithic farmers may be long gone, but their legacy still lies beneath the modern landscape. And if you've enjoyed uncovering this story of innovation and survival, make sure to like the video and subscribe so you can continue exploring history with us.